Hey guys, welcome back to the pre-production podcast. Thank you so much for listening for yet another week. I have a guest today that I'm very excited about. He just so happens to be one of my favorite filmmakers working today. I think the best filmmaker making horror movies, period, right now, and that is Mr. Mike Flanagan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh man, thank you for having me and for that blisteringly humbling and terrifying intro. Thank you.
Well, it's true. It's true. And, getting to know you a little bit over the past couple years, I can confidently say that the thing they say about meeting some of your heroes is not always true. You're a good dude and you're talented, and it's just an honor to talk to you. So thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to see what you're doing next. I've loved everything you've done already. But today we're going to take the listener through a little bit of a journey on your history and how you got started, and what that spark was for you that made you think, I wonder if I could actually do that for real, or is that even possible? I would love to know where that started for you.
I don't remember exactly when it happened. It was sometime after I saw the movie Jaws that I decided I wanted to make movies. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to do that. And a friend of mine had a VHS camcorder, and we started making movies in the backyard, and that never stopped. I'd have all my friends come over. We'd frantically write something. We'd start shooting it, and it was a very pretend like this, pretend like that, running around. I learned a lot just kind of playing around with VHS, and then wondering, how it was in movies that if we were filming a conversation, we would film shot, reverse shot, editing in camera, and just kind of okay, here's your line. Now come over here. Here's your line. But I would wonder, how the hell do they get music to go over and edit? When they cut their cameras in the real movie, how does the music keep going? And my solution to that was I would assemble the movie in camera, and then I'd play it back on my television. And with the VHS camera, I'd record it off the TV while hitting play and pause on a tape deck that was playing the music, so that it would carry over the edits. So
they don't know how good they have it today.
I know. By the time I finished these little movies, they were fifth generation VHS video quality. So they just looked, like soup. But I loved it. And, you get bit by that bug, and all you can think about when you finish is how to make something else, and when you get to try again. And I grew up in a middle class military household. My dad was in the Coast Guard, so we moved around a lot. We weren't people who knew about Hollywood or movies or anything. And my dad, who came from a family, it was all military service, was kind of wait, you want to do what with your life? What is that as a job? How do you make a living doing that? None of us knew kind of what it meant to want to make movies for a living. And my dad encouraged me very strongly to try to find anything else, really, that would be a real job and give me some kind of security and reliability. But I just couldn't stop. I made a bunch of these little VHS movies, and they had a morning TV show at my high school, and I made little movies for that. And I would work on them for a couple weeks, and they could have titles, and they had this cool little kind of linear video editing deck, and I could cut them together somewhat and get more ambitious. And I thought very much I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach history.
Wow, I did not know that.
When my dad said, find something else, that was the thing that I said, okay, well, if I can't make movies, I would love to teach high school history. I applied for a college in Maryland that I really wanted to go to and get into their secondary ed program, and I couldn't afford to go. I was a good student. I had good grades, and I got offered a small scholarship to the college, but I didn't have enough money to go. And I was devastated. I didn't go to my first choice school. I went to Towson State University instead. And I got to Towson, and I had to pick my elective classes, and they had intro to film. And I thought, the other thing didn't work, and I'm here. I might as well. And intro to film, we shot movies on Super 8. I just completely fell in love again. And it was no, this is what I want to do. This is it. And I remember my instructor, his name was Barry Moore, who was a teacher there. And he stood in front of the class on the first day, and he said, how many of you here want to be a director? And everybody raised their hands. And he was like, you should all let that go. That isn't where this is going to go for you. You know how few people get to do that? Like you should focus on something else. We're going to learn all the other departments. We're going to find all the other ways you can work in film. And I went up to him after class and I was like, I still want to be a director. And he kind of laughed at me. But I went through the program there, and I had a substitute teacher named Steve Yeager who came in, and he had just won. He was this huge celebrity in Baltimore at the time because he had won a filmmaker trophy at Sundance for his documentary about John Waters. It was called Divine Trash. And everyone was like, oh my God, this guy went to Sundance. Like, that's amazing. And he was my substitute. And he came in and he was like, oh, how many of you guys want to be a director? Everyone was like, yeah. And he was like, well, you can do it. And everyone was like, what? And Barry said we couldn't. And he's like, no, you totally can. But the only way to do it is to do it yourself. We watched Stranger Than Paradise, like early Jarmusch. We were all talking about Clerks at the time. It was like blowing up the world.
Right.
Brothers McMullen, El Mariachi. Here are first films often self-financed by big directors. And you can go out, a couple $1,000s, you can go out and make a movie because of this brand new technology that has just arrived, that has democratized filmmaking, called mini DV.
Hell yeah.
And yeah. And we were all like, what? There's a digital camcorder that shoots in what approximates 24 frames a second, has this, I think it was, what did they call it? It was like a 239 pull down or something. It was like 233 pulled, I can't even remember. You don't need to shoot celluloid. You can go out there and make a movie. The movies that had just hit that year were Mike White's Chuck and Buck had just hit Sundance and
right.
was shot mini DV. He was very encouraging to the point of, now that I look back on it, like slightly irresponsible, because he said, if any of you have a feature length script that you believe in, I will try to help you get produced.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a wow. He's definitely trying. Like that's a lot.
Really, really overachieving.
Yeah.
For the class. And I went up to him after class and I took him up on it. And I said, I wrote this script. You said you would help produce it. and he was like, sure. And the script is called Make Believe. It wasn't about anything. It was about dating in college. Like I didn't have anything to say about anything yet, but I wanted to make it. And I had written it, and my friends and I had like done table reads of it in the theater department. And he was like, if you can raise enough money to shoot this, I'll produce it, which was like, now I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. But he was incredibly encouraging, and he put me in touch with a whole bunch of really terrific local department heads in the Baltimore scene to learn. And he was shooting industrial films in DC, brought me on set as a PA. So I could learn the set.
That's fantastic. What a great teacher.
Yeah, he was great. He was a wonderful mentor, and he was true to his word. We put together, like, I think it was $10,000 to shoot this mini DV feature, and we got the school involved because they let us use all the dorms and the classrooms and the cafeterias and the exteriors. They let us shoot anywhere on campus, and they gave the crew who worked on it, they gave them independent study credit. So all the film students could come work on the thing. And then the actors who were in it were from the theater department at Towson. They got credit for being in the film. I think they got 3 elective credits for their degrees. And we made this movie. Then Steve got it into the Maryland Film Festival. We had the world premiere at the Maryland Film Festival at the Charles Theater of this little DV movie it was fine. It was cute. It wasn't about anything. It wasn't appealing for anyone who wasn't in the movie. Like it really, though, for me, seeing it with an audience, and people were so kind of kind and polite and kind of like, you did it, like you made a movie. That's really hard to do. And it was feature length. It was finished. And I came out of that just like, I have to do this again.
From that perspective of somebody who started making VHS movies, loved Jaws, did you ever have, because I had this, I very much so didn't understand the real world of filmmaking and the amount of pressure, the workload, the real world grit aspect of actually making a movie and doing it all day for however many weeks and weeks and weeks. So when you shot this movie, Make Believe, did you go into it knowing this is going to be work?
You don't know what it's like to make a film till you make one. And I'd read a lot and I'd been told a lot and I'd been on sets. So I had a vague impression of what the process would look like, but I had no clue what it really meant to have to hold all this in your head, and what it feels like once this vehicle that you're strapped to begins moving, and how hard but necessary it is to turn it. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I definitely didn't go into it feeling like it would be easy. I just didn't know what it meant that it would be difficult. I do think that that is an attitude. I've seen it. I've seen the people who kind of have like Animaniacs version of filmmaking in their head, where I'm trying to think of another way to put it. Like where
I get that entirely.
But yeah, it's like when you saw like, Wacko and Dot making a movie,
It just seems like a whimsical, amazing thing that just comes together perfectly.
Right. And you turn the camera around and you're pointing it at essentially what you see in the film, like if they're making Jaws, they've got the shark there waiting for his cue, and they're out there in the middle of the water, and it's just like, and action, and the shark does its thing.
It all comes together. When I first got my camcorder, which was a mini DV camcorder, I was convinced that I was going to make movies that looked as good as like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man on it. Like I was like, that's just what's going to happen. I mean, the lighting that they did in that movie and the way everyone looks, that is just natural. They just look like that. That perfect lighting and all of that just happened. That was what the sun did that day. I had no fucking clue. I've spoken with a couple filmmakers now, and most of them answer that question with similar to the way you did, where they're like, I had an idea that it wouldn't be, a stroll through the park. And that's good, because I think that's an indicator that you're aware of the fact that it's going to be hard work, but you want to do it anyway. It's not just about being rich or famous or, no one ever says that. It's always like, no, I know this is hard, but I got to do it.
Most of the people I know who've made films and the people I meet out here kind of in the business, none of them wanted to be rich and famous when they were a kid. Like nobody really even knew what that meant. People wanted to make movies, and the rest of it, wanting to be successful and realizing you can make a real living with it comes later. And I think a lot of the hunger when it changes from wanting to make movies to wanting to be famous, or like that shift can actually be pretty destructive.
It's good to have a healthy amount of optimism for your talent. It's good to know what you're good at, but I think that the second you start to be like, oh yeah, we're good, I know what I'm doing, that's when you start to suck, because you stop second guessing yourself. You stop being your own best critic. You stop looking at your work in a critical way. And I think if you start off that way, and I've met tons of independent filmmakers in Ohio who started that way, who were like, yeah, I'm good to go. We're good. I don't need notes. I don't need feedback. Don't give me notes. That's when it all just goes to shit town.
Be aware of the fact that you're going to be learning how to do this every time you're lucky enough to try. That's the other thing is I've also encountered people who have said, I don't feel as though there's something left for me to learn. Not in those words really, but that like, I know what I need to know. I'm not going to learn anything from this experience. And I think that's dangerous too, because the overwhelming number of filmmakers I know, and I'm talking like up to like Oscar winners, who I've been lucky enough to sit and just chat with, all of them have confessed the same imposter syndrome, like the same idea that like, we don't really know what we're doing. And any minute now, someone's going to figure it out and they're going to kick us out. Any second now, we're going to be discovered for the frauds that we are. I love that is such a pervasive anxiety. I hear it from actors. I hear it from filmmakers. It really, I think, is a healthy attitude. And it is so encouraging to meet with people who, like, I perceive them as like, well, they don't deal with the problems I deal with when they make a movie. They're endlessly confident and they're fully supported by their studio, and they don't have to put up with any of the stressors that I put up with. They don't have to go home at night wondering, like, is this the last thing I'm ever going to work on? And to find out that, like, oh no, they have the same experience. It's just with a much bigger budget and with more eyeballs on them,
Yeah, I had the same thought when I was watching Spielberg's acceptance speech for Fabelmans for Golden Globes. He said, my life is always characterized as a success story, but I've never viewed it that way. And I was like, Jesus Christ, man. Like,
Yeah.
do you know who you are? Like, I was like, but that's the case of everyone. You're right. You know, I mean, and when I first met you, I had a similar thought. I was like, well, I mean, this guy's done all this stuff he's done. And you're sitting there like agonizing over these little moments in the editing bay, you know? And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
everyone is the same. When I shot Shelby, and it's my first movie, my first real movie, but like every day I came to set thinking like, I don't belong, but I have to pretend like I do. And I got really good at pretending. And then I realized, okay, people actually like working with me. That's good. That's a good feeling. But then it became, okay, how do I continue to sort of foster some confidence, because I just don't have it. And it's a tough thing to do. And I think that it's really easy to sit back and watch a movie and think, well, that turned out pretty damn good. That guy or that girl, man, they're fucking, they know exactly what they're doing. And then you meet them and they're just nervous wrecks. You know?
100%.
Yeah.
It completely changed the way I thought about movies, and it changed the way I interacted with movies. And you and I talked about this a little bit when we were together in editorial. But I used to, as a consumer of movies and someone who's part of, back then it was Facebook. It was the Facebook kind of film community. I used to put up reviews of movies that I saw. And I had no problem saying like, this movie sucked. What the hell were they doing? What were they thinking? Oh my God. And as I made movies, like, I stopped doing that almost immediately. It changed the way I look at movies, and knowing what goes into making them, and knowing kind of that every movie is this ship in a storm. It made me a lot less judgmental about the finished product, and a lot more determined to amplify movies that really did work for me, and to try to support filmmakers. There's a thing that happens when you're hypercritical of something, where I think it gives you a rush, because you feel in the moment that you are smarter than the thing that you're critiquing, that you know better how it could have been done. It's a self kind of aggrandizing feeling. And of course that feels good, because it's like, look how smart I must be, because I can look down at this thing and I can just tear it apart. And what's fascinating about that is if you're a filmmaker, it shuts off the part of you that's the most important, which is the part that's always meant to be learning how to do this.
Yes.
And the minute you start dismissing it and saying, this has nothing to offer me, even if the movie doesn't work for you, or even if, the movie didn't resonate with you as much as you might hope, suddenly opening yourself back up to being like, yeah, okay, it's not my favorite movie. It didn't do everything for me. However, boy, I learned something very cool about how to approach blocking from this scene, or that was a really good performance in there from this actor. You start opening yourself up to the things that are resonating with you. And even movies that, otherwise you might dismiss as like, I hated it. It's like, no, there's actually quite a bit about it you did not. And quite a bit about it that has a lot of value. And that so many people shut themselves off from that, I think, is sad.
All right. So Make Believe is out. It's at a festival. Your own words, it wasn't really about anything, but you learned a lot. Was it still scary to show that to a crowd? Was it the first time you had seen it with a crowd, or had you shown it to people before?
It was the first time I ever saw it with a crowd. We rented a limo to take us to the theater. I rented a tuxedo. Like, it was we really overdid it. But it's part of that fantasy, right? It's part of, as you grow up and you see what a movie premiere is, like, you see all that and you romanticize it in such a profound way. We were trying to kind of create this experience for ourselves, and we were all 20 years old. I mean, for us, it was the pinnacle event of our lives up to that point. Now that I feel much more as an adult, I've heard from some of the other grown-ups who were in the audience that day who were like, it was adorable. Like, you guys were, everyone was smiling, seeing the magic in your guys' experience, And I thought at the time, it was like, we're going to go to Sundance. We're going to sell this. Like, this is going to be a big, huge thing that's going to launch my career as a filmmaker. It absolutely was not and did not. And the movie evaporated the next day and was never distributed, which is good. I'm thrilled that it was. I've gone out of my way. There was briefly a time when you could get a copy on like Amazon from this self-publishing indie distributor, and I've taken it down. I'm just like, nope. That was a classroom. It doesn't belong out there in the world. But I made that movie 2 more times. Okay, well, that one got into a festival. Let's make another one. And it was a lot of the same actors, a lot of the same crew. We had a slightly bigger budget because we found people who were like, oh, it had a premiere at a festival. We'll invest a little money, and friends and family poured in. And the next movie was still about dating in college. It was still not a good movie, but it was a little better. And then I made it again. It was called Ghosts of Hamilton Street. And that one, someone's tracked it down. People have found it out there. And I always get very upset when I hear this. But like, somewhere in the world, someone's been able to track down this movie. It played in a lot more festivals. It starred Scott Graham, who would later star in the Oculus short that really launched my career.
Sure.
It looked better. The technique was better. It was more commercially accessible, but still not commercial. Yeah, still not commercially viable, I'll say. And it was a great learning experience, and it was shot on mini DV. So I did 3 of these mini DV features and kept kind of growing and growing and growing, and then decided, along with a lot of friends, okay, well, I've made 3 indie features. Time to move to Hollywood, where they undoubtedly will be very impressed by what I have accomplished. And a whole bunch of us graduated and packed up the van and what few possessions we had in the world. I think we had 2 cars between 5 of us that moved out there, no health insurance. We shared a 3-bedroom apartment in Glendale. That's about 5 miles away from where I'm sitting right now. I still live in Glendale. We all moved out with stars in our eyes, like so many thousands of people do every day, to Hollywood to try to break in. And I started trying to get meetings. And it was like, why doesn't anyone want to meet with me? I've made 3 features. And I eventually got a job editing car commercials for cable access.
Okay. So starting as an editor it's a bit of fate there because you keep editing. You're still editing.
Oh, yeah. Best thing that ever happened to me. Best thing that ever happened to me as a filmmaker. And when people ask me, I get the question a lot. The question I used to ask all the time, which is just how? How do you get in? And how do you make movies? And the answer is I have no idea. And no one knows because the rules keep changing. And the stories you hear of how someone got in and started a career, the moment that story is out there, that door is shut. And you're trying to find the next one. And all the magic bullets people tell you to do, none of them work. None of them last. The only thing that really works is you keep shooting.
Exactly. That's the same thing that I've noticed over the course of recording these interviews, because one of the goals with this show, in fact, the primary goal, is a couple of years from now, if I have 50 episodes, people can look back and find some kind of commonality between all of the guests. What did they all do? Okay, maybe I should try that. If there's one thing. And thus far, without a doubt, every single person never rested on their laurels. Everyone just kept making things, kept writing, kept editing, kept shooting, kept trying to produce, kept trying to finance. There was never a moment where they stopped, even when they weren't making money. Most of them were not making any money for a very long time. There's never a moment where you stop being a filmmaker, at least in your mind, and you're out there boots to the ground, actively doing things, whether that's PAing, whether it's getting coffee, whether it's, pulling focus, whatever it is, you're engaged in some capacity, and you're networking in some way, maybe even subconsciously networking. People are seeing you do things and they're like, hey, that guy's around. He's good at that or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. And you were doing that. I understand that luck is a part of everything in some small way. I always push back against that a little bit because you still made those movies. You still got in the goddamn car and went to LA. No one magically transported you there. Nobody magically created Mike Flanagan's doppelganger to go make movies for you. You still did it,
You're completely right. Luck means a lot and it comes into play in a huge way, but you need to be standing right next to what you want to get lucky. You're not going to be there to get lucky if you're not constantly trying and getting as close to what you want as you physically can, like getting on set, shooting with your friends. Like you have a camera in your pocket that's better than the camera I made all my features on. And you have software on your phone that is equivalent to the $100,000 editing software that I started working on in college that you can now get for $5,000. I find that too, that the luck thing can be an excuse. It can be you sit and wait for it to happen to you. That's not the way luck works. You have to be so tenacious about creating a moment in which you will be available to luck.
Yep.
That, that is some of the biggest battle. I personally learned more about filmmaking editing than I ever did in school, than I ever did from a book, from watching videos, to an extent from being a PA on set, although I think that's a critical thing everyone needs to do, to learn about how sets work. When it comes to learning how a movie is made, my eureka moment was editing. Oh my God, that's where it happens. All the rest of it is, of course, critically important. And creating those ingredients to make the movie, which is what you do in production, what an incredible art that is. And it's so hard. But everything happens in the cutting room. That, to me, is the cutting edge of storytelling and the visual medium. I was lucky enough that the only work I could get was editing. And not even the fun, sexy editing. I was doing car commercials. And there were times looking at that where it was like, how do I make this a story? I have 30 seconds to sell a car. How do I make it funny? How do I get a laugh? Like, how do I get a legitimate, clever laugh in the 30-second car commercial that's going to air at midnight in Glendale? And then it's like, okay, run the race in front of you. Yeah, I want to make a big movie someday, but how do I nail this commercial? Or at least get a laugh, and then do a better one. And then realize that because you're working for this company that has these cameras and these microphones and these lights, because you're using them to shoot your car commercials, do you think they'll let you borrow that for the weekend?
There you go.
And if the answer is yes, that's how you go make Oculus the short.
That's it.
And that's everything. And that's how it went. I was shooting these commercials during the day. I borrowed the equipment with the blessing of my employer, took it all to a little room in Venice, and we shot Oculus over the course of 3 days for $1,000. That did better for me than any of the feature films that I'd made. And now I'm getting a meeting. Now I'm getting to talk to a production company. I'm at another film festival, but there's real kind of enthusiasm because it was genre.
Yeah.
Like, because it was horror. Suddenly people are paying attention. And even then it didn't launch my career. It took 7 years to make the Oculus feature after that, and Absentia had to happen in the middle. And I'm editing reality TV shows 9 to 5. And then I'm doubling up because I find out I'm going to be a dad. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do my day shift editing, and I'm going to take a night shift editing another reality show. And maybe my whole life is editing reality TV. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's as close to this thing as I'm ever going to get. But, this is my last window before I'm a dad. So let's try to do it. Let's try to make it happen right now. What is my excuse for not doing it? And what do I have around me? What's at my fingertips that isn't going to cost me anything? I lived in a weird rundown apartment across the street from a creepy tunnel, and I walked through the tunnel every day. And I thought, this is a creepy place. Oh, and they had this new camera, this crazy new camera, the Canon 5D, that suddenly looked like $1 million, like looked so good. You could change lenses and you could have this beautiful depth of field and shoot in true 24 frames a second. And it's like this. Oh my God, when I started making films, if I had access to this camera, think of the things I could do. I can shoot in low light. I can shoot in that tunnel in the middle of the night without any other augmented lights, and it looks good. So, okay, I don't need lights. I don't need a full crew. I need a camera operator, someone to hold the boom. If I don't have someone full-time, the actors will do it. I have my apartment. I can shoot in there. No one's going to notice. And I have this tunnel. As long as we run before someone asks for a permit, we'll be okay. And they won't ask for the permit anyway because the camera looks like I'm just a tourist.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the camera doesn't look like a film set. And there's no lights. So, like, who's going to know we're doing anything? And I have a clock. I know when my son's going to be born. So I have until then to finish the movie.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That really is. I mean, for so many reasons. I can't tell you how eerily similar my experience making my first feature is, in that I found out I was going to be a dad. I'm doing YouTube. You're doing reality TV. YouTube, talking about movies, kind of, it's movies. It's something. but not really what I want to do. Gonna be a dad. Oh shit, gonna be a dad of twins. Fuck, I better get going. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy how that really propels you forward to know like, all right, I have maybe a deadline here. Maybe I should get moving.
It fascinates me how different people respond to that moment, because I've heard similar moments. And it's the difference between saying, I can't go make a movie right now, I'm about to be a dad, and saying, I have to make a movie right now because I'm about to be a dad. That to me is what makes your own luck. That's what makes filmmakers. And everyone that I meet out here and talk to about it, these are people that I'm profoundly jealous of professionally, who I look at and like, you just had it figured out, didn't you? And to a person, they're like, nope, not even a little bit. Not only that, I felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails for dear life. And I just recently looked around and realized I was standing on my own feet. You know, like it's the strangest collision of what feels like nonstop delusional work and a moment of opportunity that turns you into an overnight success after 20 years.
Yeah. I've referenced this a few times. Mark Hamill made a quote, and you have just worked with him, and I'm sure was great. But he had this quote where he was talking about how he was characterized as an overnight success when Star Wars came out, and that it kind of rubbed him the wrong way because he had been in sitcoms and soap operas, and he was really busting his ass doing auditions for multiple years, showing up in little bit parts on random ABC shows and stuff, and suddenly he's an overnight success. And he's like, I've been out here, you know, working my ass off. Now you finally saw me, but I've been here. It's very, very rare that someone just explodes and they had done nothing ever. It's always somebody who's been crawling through the dirt to get to some sort of semblance of success.
Oh yeah, that's always the best advice that I got, was just stay there, keep working. And if no one's paying you to work, shoot it on your own and just keep going. There's every reason not to. And when you start to look at those reasons as, now that's a reason that I have to, it changes everything. You're in this fascinating place career-wise where your movie's finished. You've done the hard part of the first movie, but you're in that kind of neutral zone between before and after the movie. And it's such a strange place to be. And I remember being there because you feel like you've just lifted this mountain up and nobody noticed. It's the strangest feeling of like, well, I did the thing I always wanted to do, and nothing changed. Like, it's the weirdest feeling, and that feeling stays with you even as you're going to do your next movie, and you're going to feel the same way, and then you're going to do your next movie, and you're going to be like, yeah, just keep making movies, and nothing's changed, and like then one day you're going to be like, oh shit, I've been making movies for years professionally.
It's like a ladder that never reaches the top and you're constantly climbing it. And there's always this next rung and you're like, well, if I just get there, I'm going to, you know, that's really what I've been chasing. Even though you already caught 5 other things you were chasing. You know, you got the manager, you got the agent, you got the good score on the blacklist, whatever. You did all that stuff that you thought you'd never do, and you made a movie, and oh my God. And what's the next rung? All right, well, I got to make a bigger movie now, or I got to get distributed, wider theatrical release or something. That comes into that thing we talked about earlier, which is that imposter syndrome / wanting to be your own best critic and best yourself constantly. And it's a tough balance, really, to know, like, all right, I have done things. I have achieved goals that I wanted to do. I am self-sufficient in some capacity. My kids got diapers today because I did a thing. That's great. But like, you just have to keep reminding yourself that.
Totally. There isn't that moment where you become a filmmaker. The moment where you become a filmmaker happens to you when you're unaware of it because you're too busy working. So get to work. Because if you just pick up your phone and you start shooting, and you just agree that you won't stop. One leads to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. It'll happen to you while you're working. It'll happen to you while you're busy. And one day you'll turn around and be like, oh shit, I missed it. And here I am. And you won't feel any better. To your point, you won't feel like you're you know, the goals.
I laugh because it's true.
It's so true. It's like you feel like, well, once I have this, then I'll feel really proud of myself and secure and confident. It's like, nope.
A lot of filmmakers, when you're starting out, you're sort of like grasping for some kind of validation because you've been in a position for so long of trying to prove yourself to other people. It's not like any other career in that way, where like if you go to school for 8 years to be a lawyer or a doctor, you might be a shitty lawyer, you might be a shitty doctor. That's true. You might kind of wash out and realize it's not for you. But there's no real path, as you said, to being a filmmaker. It's sort of like this thing that just you maybe can find a way. And so you're looking for that validation. You want somebody to touch you on the shoulder and say, hey, I see you. You did a good fucking job. And you are real. Your talent is real. And that's something I did experience on Shelby, which was great. And you've been a part of that. And I appreciate, and I will thank you for that for years and years and years. But I think that that's something that was very good for me. And I was able to that was something I actually did feel a little closure on, of like, okay, I did the thing for real. And irregardless of what happens, I achieved that and I'm happy about that.
Absolutely. And you're so right. For other professions, they give you a certificate that verifies that you are the thing. When you graduate from law school, they give you a thing and they're like, you are a lawyer. You're like, sweet. You're like, we have all agreed. All of us together have agreed that you're a lawyer. That's what you did it. And in being a doctor, most professions. And the funniest part about this is like, if you get that piece of paper, if you get a degree in filmmaking, people are like, you graduated.
Yep.
Yeah, you did it. And you're like, okay. And then you have your film degree and you bring it to any professional environment where it's like, this is my film degree. And they're like, what?
Great.
What are you doing? Wrangle that cable, noob.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's like, it's so, there is no moment. And like when you have your premiere for your first film, you'll be like, wow, this is the fake premiere they're throwing just for me, for my little movie. A real premiere would be very different, but this is the one that I've got, which feels right. I wonder what a real premiere must be like. And it's like, no, that was it. That's it. Someday someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and be like, because you're the establishment now, would you come on this podcast and talk about what it's like to become a filmmaker? And then you kind of go like, oh shit.
Right.
Like it happened. It's a very weird thing. I feel like for people who are out there listening I remember this feeling so well of just like beating my head against the wall, just being like, how do I do this? How do I talk them in? Who do I go to convince that I can do this? And I'm just so sorry that there isn't a better answer baked into the industry. It's so strange that it's this huge wall and you look up at this fortress and it's like, how do I get on the other side of that wall? And there's millions of people banging on the wall because they all want to get in there because it looks like so much fun to do this. And every time a little door opens and you hear somebody got in over there, everybody runs over and like swarms the door and it's already gone. And you're like, how the hell do I get over there? You'll never know when it happens. If you just keep shooting, you just keep writing, get as close to sets as you can. If you're available, take a gig, spend a couple of weeks shooting a movie, even if you don't think it's great. Make your own movie, even if you don't think it's great, just make it. And sooner than later, all of that, you realize you've pushed your way through this wall on like some molecular level, like that you've just face planted into it and pushed forward. And like the T-1000 through the bars, like you've just walked like through this wall and you're on the other side of it now. And you start to look around and you realize it's not very crowded over here. And everyone's like, dude, we're here. How'd you do that? And it's like, I don't know. I just face planted on the wall. Like, am I really over here? And everybody talks about it. And then you realize it's like, okay, over here you're making money and your family's okay and you're telling stories and you're meeting people you really admire. And then you're really grateful for the wall. And it's really crazy because once that happens, you're like, I'm glad that I went through what I went through. I'm glad that I appreciate what I have. I'm glad it wasn't easy. I'm glad the wall exists because I want to stay a little longer before someone takes my place, which they will. I'm a sucker for the movie The Natural. I just love it.
Oh my God. I have the score on vinyl.
Oh, me too. It's an incredible film, incredible score. But one of my favorite parts of the damn thing is when he's at the plate at the end and they show the new pitcher come up to the plate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in slow motion.
His replace, the future of,
Yeah. It's him, and
Yeah.
it's the like, yep, that isn't the enemy, that's the natural progression of the way this goes. It's been pointed out to me that I'm in my middle-aged career phase, where I'm part of the crusty old establishment, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't have my finger on the pulse. I never did, but I'm just doing the math. I'm probably at the middle of this thing that turned into my life, that turned into my career. And I've checked off so many of the stuffs. First, I wanted to do a bigger budget movie. Then I wanted to do a theatrical movie. Then I wanted to do a theatrical studio movie. I did all that. And then I wanted to do television. I wanted to create television. I wanted to be like at the top. I wanted to direct every fucking episode of a TV show I create. I did that. And now I'm like, okay, IMAX, I guess. Like what is left? I'm hungry to do what I did in college that I felt like wasn't sufficient. What I want to do is like, I want to go shoot on Super 8 with my friends.
Yeah.
Like that's what I want to do. And I want to tell a story that's important to me and not worry about whether it gets into theaters or what kind of distribution it gets. It's like all I want to do now that I'm here is go back to where I started. All I wanted then was to be here. The whole thing's wacky. I want to spend the next, say I got 20 years left of viability before the singularity, or before I'm like, I don't know how to make a holographic film, or, whatever it is. I've been living in Glendale, California for that long. So I'm halfway there. What can I do? The thing that's brought me the most excitement is I want to be closer to those filmmakers like you. I want to be closer to those filmmakers who are full of this beautiful energy and who are like forging these careers out of thin air and willpower. And I want to be like, okay, I'm in a position where maybe I can make it 5% easier.
Man, that is so nice of you to say. Thank you.
Oh, of course. That's bringing me a lot of joy. Whereas like going to pitch on my 15th attempt to say, I'll do a Marvel movie if you want me to, and Marvel being like, we're good. It's really, it's like, what do I want out of the world? It's like, what I want to do is try to pay forward a little bit of whatever luck found me along the way. And I get more joy out of trumpeting about a really exciting, low budget, independent project than I get about almost anything else in my professional life right now. It's really strange.
Wow,
and
it's incredible.
Yeah, it's cool. I hope all those filmmakers listening who are on the other side of that wall, I wish I had some comforting platitude, but it's like, I just hope they keep shooting, because like, it's really fun over here. Get over here. Let's play.
If I had heard this interview 5-6 years ago, I think I would feel great about everything you're saying. This is realistic. I decided I wanted to make movies 20 years ago when I was 14. And every year that I wasn't doing it felt long. I was just waiting and waiting and waiting forever. And I would hear interviews constantly from people who would try to just sort of brush over these questions. People I really respect and admire. And I would say the person who really hit it home for me, it was actually Martin Scorsese. He did this interview where somebody asked him, what do you want to tell young filmmakers today? And he was like, make your own industry. Don't do what I did. Make your own industry. And the guy was like, what does that mean? And he was like, look, you are the future. You can choose to make your own way of making movies. No one can tell you how to make movies anymore. He was like, what we did back in the day with film and shooting out of college and all this stuff, like it's not the same anymore. Like you can make your own new Hollywood, and people start listening to you because you showed them a new way to do it. And I'm thinking about like Skinamarink, for instance. I went to a theater and saw a $15,000 movie that was released in 600 theaters.
Experimental film.
Yeah.
Too. Broke every rule they tell you need to be focused on when it comes to commercial viability, almost in order.
Yeah.
It was like, this is the only way you're going to get a movie into theaters are the following 10 things. And it was like, fuck you, fuck you,
yep.
fuck you, all the way to the end. I felt the same way about Terrifier 2.
Exactly, yeah.
It's so energizing to me to see these filmmakers, because I sit in these meetings all the time with executives and studio people and listen to them kind of so confidently explain to me what it takes to get into a theater, what it takes to be a hit on streaming, what it means to be commercially viable in today's marketplace. And then I just watch these people show up and completely flip the table And it's so inspiring. It's so nice. It's so cool to just be like, yeah, all of that, all the metrics and the focus groups and all the algorithmic data and all the harvesting of viewing habits and all this stuff is just never going to be a better indicator than the creative spirit of someone who has something to say. And it doesn't always set the world on fire. Every passionate independent film isn't going to pull the box office numbers that Terrifier 2 pulled. Damien doesn't know exactly what worked about that. I had the privilege of having lunch with Damien Leone and just saying, congratulations. How did you do it? And he's like, I don't know. Like none of us know. Nobody knows. And it's so nice to watch these miracles happen where it's just like, yeah, it's exciting that nobody knows. It's exciting that Skinamarink is gonna like be a midnight staple for 10 years theatrically. And that someone who otherwise is like, well, if I make something that strange and personal and immersive, I don't think there's an audience for it. And it's like that movie goes, yes, there is. Make your movie, take your shot. What a cool thing. And that you can do it without spending $50,000 on negative, like without mortgaging your parents' house just to pay your lab fees, like that you can shoot that thing for 15 grand without an actor. Like
there's not even close-ups in the movie. Nobody even gets a close-up. It's crazy.
There's no recognizable human face in the movie. Everything you're told you have to do, nobody knows what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
And every 18 months, there's a reminder of that.
Yep.
I find it to be so exciting. And I remember them telling us when I went to make believe that digital video was going to democratize filmmaking. And it didn't right away. The promise that was made back in like 96, back in the Dogma 95 days, that didn't come to pass. It wasn't that this technology made it so that anyone everywhere could just make a great movie. Like, that's not the way it worked. The technology kept evolving, and it led to this glut of content. It started to happen where festivals were flooded with movies that took advantage of the technology but didn't have a story to tell, right? The promise of the democratization of the film industry, I think, started to really be fulfilled about 10 years ago. And I think it's because you started to see filmmakers looking at all of the available technology, whether it was a phone, camera, interactive. That was when it started to happen. And they started to figure out how to turn an audience on to it. I think Jason Blum is a pioneer in this with Paranormal Activity.
Right.
When nobody would distribute the movie, and so his marketing campaign was demand it. Everything has been changing. We were told back in the mid-90s and like right around the year 2000 that was when the revolution would be, but I think the revolution happened later, and I think the fruits of that are popping up left and right, and it's so cool.
I think that so many people who listen to this are going to be inspired, man. I mean, and I knew that as soon as I asked you to come on, that you would drop some wisdom bombs. Having talked to you for a few years now, usually whenever I do, it's like I walk away feeling good about movies, and I can't say that about every filmmaker. I've talked to a lot of filmmakers. I walk away feeling kind of bad about movies, and I'm like, fuck, man. But you're different, man. You've done it. Like, as you said, you've done so many things you've wanted to do already. You've made Stephen King adaptations. You directed a personal TV show like Midnight Mass that I still think is your best work. You've made big movies for theaters. You've made big movies for streaming, and you still have found a way to remain optimistic about the whole thing. I'm at the small end of this right now. I've been slightly peeking through the doorway of the studio and seeing like how they talk about movies there, and it's not great. There's a piece of you that sort of dies when you see, I see, so this really is an industry, and you're kind of reminded of that. But like, I still drove to my friend's house last night listening to movie scores, imagining shots, and like, how would I string this together? And I get excited about it. Ever since I was a kid, I've been imagining stories and thinking about stories and characters and twists and ideas and whatever, and that's never going to go away. And it's nice to talk to somebody like you who's maintained that for as long as you have, and who's really fucking good at it, man. I got to say again, I'm not trying to be a suck up or anything, but seriously, it's just nice to see somebody who's done all that and has maintained the way you have.
I appreciate that so much. And I'm going to be really excited to watch you basically sitting right here doing this just paying that forward, and you're going to feel just as weird about it as I did.
Probably.
Hearing somebody say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, and I'm excited to see what you do next. Again, it was an honor to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure.